Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Healthy Rebel Speaks Out. And I am Bonni London, your host. And today we have an extraordinary guest joining us. She is a two-time TEDx speaker, the founder of Relationship Alchemy, and the creator of PassionBody Activation retreats. With over 20 years experience working with clients and has a master's degree in traditional Chinese medicine. She's on a mission to empower midlife women who have been tirelessly caring for others or grinding away at their careers until they feel utterly drained. I think this is something most of us can all relate to. In a world where women are often finding themselves compromising their authenticity just to fit into these roles, Mary Elizabeth is here to guide them on a journey to transformation. So if you are ready to tap into your inner rebel and embark on a journey of self-discovery, transformation, and empowerment, you are in for a treat. I am so excited. So please stay tuned as we dive in deep today to the world of passion, purpose, joy with the remarkable Mary Elizabeth Molly. Welcome, Mary Elizabeth, to Healthy Rebels Speaks Out.
Thank you. I'm just so filled up by that introduction. I love it. Thank you.
Well, great. First, I always like to begin just to hear a little bit about what sparked your passion to begin this journey and this becoming your passion.
Well, for the past 8 years, I was focused on coaching women around their relationships specifically. So romantic relationships, familial relationships, really, how do we ask for what we want? How do we communicate more effectively? All those things in how we navigate the world. And what I found about a year ago, I began to no longer feel as aligned with that as a focus as it was for 7 years before. So I had to go through my own deep dive. And what I discovered is that the relationship I'm most passionate about fostering and expanding is this relationship with ourselves. And this becomes so crucial in midlife because very often, as the intro said, we've been caught up in doing what everybody else wants, pleasing people, fulfilling the wishes of our parents, taking care of children if we've had children. And there comes a point, it's like a reckoning, where something inside begins to rebel. That's why I love the name of your podcast. Something inside begins to rebel and go, well, what about me? But what happens right after that question is very often, wait a minute, who am I? Because we don't even know who we are apart from all the roles we've been playing. And it's that inquiry of who am I and what really makes me tick and what do I desire now that I maybe have more space in my life because the kids are off to school or in college, or maybe I'm transitioning to a different job or whatever the thing is. That question of who am I now at this moment in my life is so crucial to answer in order to create a thriving life for the rest of our lives. And many of us miss it or stuff it down or stay trying to be good. And I'm here to say, don't do that. Don't miss it.
Yes, so many questions there. This is so huge, and I feel I just like your opinion on how, in some ways, women, we have so much more freedom today than, let's say, like 40 years ago. But on the other hand, we had, like, in some ways, much more like defined roles. And I can see like a positive and negative to that. So what's your experience with that?
I agree. The positive and the very defined roles allows us to know what we're supposed to do. And the positive in not having such defined roles anymore is that we get to really honor our own desires in a way that our mothers and grandmothers didn't. I could see it in my mother. I'm just going to go to my mother because that's who I grew up with and that's who I saw,
Yeah.
right? And there was a lot that she stifled to be what she felt was a good mother. And today, I feel like she could have had had she had a different makeup personally, but also culturally, today there's more permission to design your life in a way that's more true to you. I think especially the financial piece is important. Many of us have financial independence in a way that my mother did not. And so many women of her generation did not. And so with financial independence comes more choice, comes more power, comes more responsibility, really. And with all of that, I feel like we're in an incredible moment where we get to ask, do I want to do it this way? Is this working for me? Is there another way that would still be great for my loved ones, but also great for me? These are crucial questions to ask.
And I think it's something as women we're not trained to. Like our whole identity is wrapped up in I just will have to share, having been a single parent of twin girls, they went off to college at the same time, and everyone said to me, well, now you get to have your time. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't know how to make any, and I always had my career, but still every decision was about that.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
I can relate to this topic. And my question is, why is this looking inward for identity so challenging for us?
Well, it's the soup we swim in, as I like to say. We swim in a cultural soup that blocks introspection, that wants us distracted, that wants us afraid, that wants us locked to the news 24/7 because it makes us controllable and compliant. And so introspection becomes so essential so that we know what our values are, so that we can see the truth of what's happening and decide, are we participating in this or not? Do we want to create a different world that's based on love and connection and mutual win-win, like mutual benefit? Or do we want to perpetuate the current structure, which is a very up-down, win-lose kind of structure? So while it's essential, it's also scary for a lot of people. Again, because if we grew up with parents, I feel like and I'm turning 57. No, I turned 57 recently. I was trying to remember when my birthday was.
Whatever.
I recently turned 57. And so I feel like my generation is really the first generation that was raised with more emphasis on self-awareness. That my parents' generation, it was very much, you do the right thing, you be good to your parents, you raise your kids, you show up to your job. My father and I always clashed over, he had one career his whole life. And while there's been a through line in everything I've done, the form of the work I've done has changed over my life according to my growth, my interest, my passions. And that was always hard for him to understand because he was like, no, you're supposed to become a doctor and you stay a doctor till you die, And it's like, no, not for me. So I want to come back to this piece of why introspection is so crucial and difficult for us. A, what I already said, culturally, we are primed to look outside instead of inside. B, many of us didn't grow up learning how to be with difficult feelings. We just don't have models for that. Often in our own families, we go to distraction, we go to eating, we go to TV, we go to anything but what we're actually feeling. So there's some learning that's required to be more able to sit with sensation, which is ultimately what emotions are. Emotions are sensations that our body produces when we feel something, and then we feel a certain sensation in the body and we go, oh, that's anger. Oh, that's fear. Oh, that's grief. But if we can train ourselves to sit with sensation before the label, we'll learn a lot.
I love that. And again, I can't help but go back to when my children were like 10 years old. They didn't want to keep score on the soccer field because someone should not feel bad. Are you kidding? But this was how they were taught. So
Yeah,
if you can't handle losing a soccer game or the ball goes between your legs, what happens when your spouse leaves you? Then what happens?
100%.
You know, I mean,
Yep.
I'm just saying, but this is how we are socialized. And I mean, I just remember being younger and obviously, the ice cream, the candies, just, if someone's upset, oh, well, it's uncomfortable for me to see you upset, so I'm going to pacify it,
100%.
right?
Yes. And that is such a great example because it is a very different culture now where, you get a ribbon just for participating, you get a prize just for participating, which, is lovely and sweet, but it also creates a lot of fragility. Because like you said, if you can't lose a soccer game without losing your shit, what are you going to do when your spouse leaves or when you get fired or if you have an accident, you no longer can use one of your arms, you don't have the fortitude to face life. And life is up and life is down. So the more we learn to be with both, the better we are.
And how much more do we learn from our failings than when everything, I mean, you don't change anything when thing goes right. When you fail, that's when you're going to recreate the wheel to find a new way to do something. I mean, how empowering is that when if we could have learned those lessons, but it's part of our whole culture that it is uncomfortable. I mean, even I think particularly in the United States, just if someone says, if you say, hi, how you're doing, it would be weird for a random person to be like, really bad.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. When you were talking, what it made me reflect on was our discontent. What happens for many of us when we feel discontent is we try to distract away from it, forget about it, shove it down. And I like to say your discontent is your friend, because your discontent is actually showing you where something is out of alignment. And that's what a true friend does, is helps reflect to you where you're great and where you're actually out of alignment with who you really are. A true friend would do that. And our discontent, I believe, does that. So the more we learn to sit with discomfort, not wallow in it, not get lost in it, but to be with it, like, oh, there's discomfort here. Huh. We approach it with curiosity. What's that? What's uncomfortable? Why do I feel discontented right now? What could be happening, right? What am I feeling? What is this about? That allows us to stay on a beautiful growing edge where we learn to align with who we are as changing beings, because we don't stay the same over a lifetime, but often we expect everything around us to stay the same, and yeah, it won't.
And well, what I hear you saying is listening to and cultivating our intuition to give ourselves guidance, basically.
Absolutely. That's crucial. But you can't really access your intuition until you have access to the depths of yourself. Because any other intuition is kind of, it's like your mind in drag.
Right.
If your
Yeah.
intuition is not connected to a sense of who you are and what you value and what matters to you, it's actually a mind game. And that's not real intuition. In my experience, intuition is much more profound than that. And if it's just coming off the top of my head, that's usually something that my mind has made up. And so to actually access intuition, you have to have permission for every part of yourself to be present.
This is so deep, and I can see how it could relationship back to the topic of identity and us looking constantly outside ourselves to figure out who we are and how we feel. Like, well, they're happy, so I'm happy. and how this all kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, right, when you say that.
I would say that that's kind of the first. So I want to just lay out real quick what I call the arc of an aligned life.
Uh-huh.
When we're young, and this is where the passion body work in midlife comes in. So when we're young, I call that being in our pretty body. That's when we're very concerned about our looks. We're almost trading on our looks as a currency. It's how we navigate the world.
Mm.
We want to be good wives, good mothers, good workers, get promoted. It's very much about the outside and how the outside perceives us. And we don't know ourselves that well yet. We're still figuring ourselves out. And it's a time of a lot of activity. So on the scale of doing and being, it's a doing time. And then when we get toward midlife, which some women, it happens early, this next stage. I like to look at it between 35 and 60 or so, that this question that we began this conversation with, who am I? What do I want? What about me? I've been serving everybody else. What about me? That starts to surface. And that's the time when we want to activate what I call the passion body, which is our deep internal knowing of what lights us up, what we'd love to do, what we most enjoy, what we most care about. And it's from the inside out. And our energy level might be changing if we're perimenopausal or in menopause already. We're having hormonal fluctuations. Everything's kind of a bit, dramatic. And at that time, you got to balance doing with more being. Start bringing more being in, listening to yourself, taking space, taking rest when your body asks for rest. This is that middle passage, as I like to call it, that's so crucial. And when we activate the passion body and we allow ourselves to follow what most lights us up in life, then we get to listen to the language. We get to age into our radiant body. So aging can look many different ways. And if we're lit up from within and we have value that we feel we can share, and we're accessing a depth of wisdom that we are excited about, that makes us radiant. We know those women: Helen Mirren, Iris Apfel, Michelle Obama, Oprah, Jane Fonda, who's still out there marching in protests.
Love it.
That is a woman, those are women who are aging into their radiant body. Their radiance and light and power is shining through. So if we miss this middle piece of passion body activation, it's a lot harder to be radiant when we get older. We tend to do the more invisible decline that is kind of the pathologized narrative of our culture about aging.
And ironically, I believe this is really what people want, women want as they age. And the word comes to my mind is staying relevant. In other words, you walk in the room and people still want to hear what you have to contribute. And it's a blessing to get to a certain age and have all this like experience and think about, it's not just your letters or the children, but it's your entire life experience that you have to give back to the world. I feel like there's so much to gain, but what do you think again stumps people, gets them stuck? Because obviously everyone is Jane Fonda.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think what gets us stuck is we get afraid of what we're going to find out in there if we look inside. And let me tell you, it's not as bad as you think. You may discover some major things aren't working for you, and then you have a choice to make about what you want to change in your life or not. But what I see over and over again in my clients is they discover a depth of self-compassion and love and understanding, and they understand their journey to this point, that from that basis of curiosity and compassion and love, they get to create these next chapters that are so wise and beautiful, and people are coming to them as beacons, of wisdom. That happens when we do this work. When we don't, it's not a given. If you don't look inside yourself for your whole life, it's not a given that you're going to end up super wise on the back end and have people want to talk to you. You might just shrivel up. Yeah, you might just shrivel up.
Mm-hmm. To me, what you're describing and tell me, it sounds like when people come to a point like an epiphany, where all of a sudden they realize they're this person that they never knew was even there. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's for some, it's an epiphany. For some, it's a slow revealing. I feel like it's a slow burn, kind of like people talk about an overnight success in business.
Yes.
But that overnight success took 10 or 20 years to make happen.
Right.
And I feel like the epiphany around the self and around really knowing who you are and being comfortable in your own skin, that epiphany takes a while to arrive. Maybe not 10 or 20 years, hopefully not 10 or 20 years, but it takes a while. It doesn't just happen overnight, in my experience.
You have to be interested, I think, too, because I just think about what is lost. Like it's almost a responsibility to give back to the world, right? I mean, that you give your entire self. Like what are you losing from this life experience and all of those around you? From not being everything you can be. I mean, I know they've interviewed people, who are near death, and like one of their number one regrets in life is not being authentic to themselves of what they wanted to do. So they might have wanted to do a TEDx talk like you did twice. But
right. But in order to do that, I had to face a lot of fears. And it takes a certain amount of courage to face that. Right? To say, I am going to face the stuff that makes me want to hide and that wants to keep me safe in my current little bubble. I need to face all that because I want this bigger thing, whatever that bigger thing is. It doesn't have to be a TEDx stage. It could just be having the courage to tell your spouse that the sex isn't working for you and you need it to be different. That could be someone's TEDx stage, right? Like that level of fear could be happening for someone who wants to change up their sex life, So whatever that edge is for a person, we can face those edges so much more elegantly and skillfully when we come from a place of self-acceptance, self-compassion, valuing ourselves, knowing our worth. All of that is so key. And that's just not handed to us on a platter. Most of us don't come out of childhood feeling worthy and, loving ourselves and all the things. Those are things we have to learn as adults. Most of us. Some of us are lucky. Maybe we got it as a kid, but most of us didn't have all those needs met and all those wounds. Most of us have wounding from childhood of one form or another. And if that's not faced, it doesn't ever get a chance to heal.
Yeah, I think all parents do the best they can, but there is no question. And generational, like from the last generation, it was like never complimenting directly. I mean, my grandmother, she would tell me about my cousins getting straight A's and then talk to them about me as an example. But it was almost like that she would never tell me she was proud or anything. It was like bad luck or something. Can you imagine?
Right. Oh, I can.
I've talked to a lot of other people who have had very similar experiences. And so there seems to be something that we were also told about self-praise and it being like the wrong way to go. So do you have any techniques you could maybe share with us, journal, something that
yes.
Okay, that would be wonderful.
This is a huge one. that I see all the time, this lack of ability to praise ourselves or to celebrate something that we do well. Similar to your grandmother, I was raised actually with active criticism. My father thought criticism was the way to help me want to do better. So if I got a 98 on a test, it wasn't, oh my God, you got an A. It was, where are the other 2 points, right? What happened to those other 2 points? And he apologized for that before he died. He actually said, you know what, I think I leaned too hard on the criticism, and I'm sorry about that. But, you know, that was a generational thing, because I didn't want us to have a big head, so to speak, right?
Right, exactly.
So what I teach my clients to do is to keep a celebration journal and write down 3 things a day that you feel good about, proud of. If you can't access pride, you could perhaps access good enough, right? You know, stepping stones. And either do it in the morning or the evening or just throughout the day as it occurs. Like I don't prescribe when it has to be done, but that you get in the habit of noticing things that you do right. Because our brains are primed to notice what we do wrong, because it's a vestigial quality of the brain from when we had to fight to survive out in the jungle, you know, or the plains or wherever our ancestors came from.
Talking about the ruminating thoughts I get, yes.
Yes, exactly. And our brains are natively wired to notice danger and to notice wrong. So to actually train our brains to even notice what's going well, what feels good, what we're doing right, is a practice. So I train my clients to take that on as a practice. Notice 3 things or more a day that you feel good about, that you feel you did well, or at least adequately. You know, to start, I have them notice, did you get a parking spot in front of the store? That's a different journal. I can talk about that in a second if you'd like.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So the other journal that I keep and often have people keep, I call an evidence journal. Similarly to the self-reflective, what I'm doing well, as a brain retraining technique, to notice when things go well, when synchronicities happen, when something unfolds that you're happy about. So there was a day not too long ago when it seemed like every store I was going to, I got a parking spot right in front of the store. Like that doesn't always happen. That goes in the evidence journal. Wow, I went to 3 stores today and I got a parking spot with ease. Thank you, universe, you know. So we get to prime our brains to live more in a state of gratitude and noticing what's working well. Oh, there was 1 bottle left of that supplement I wanted to get at the store, and I happened to be the one to get it, right? Like whatever the thing is where something goes right.
I love this. This is a fantastic one. I'm going to use it. The evidence journal, because I do
evidence journal.
Because the brain wants evidence. And I do think with the positive, we have to purposely think about, yes, you know, things do go my way. Things are working out, you know, and
because like you said, you said we naturally, you know, we learn from our mistakes more effectively than we learn from everything going well. So our brains are already hardwired. Like, don't worry, you're not going to forget the bad stuff, right? Because our brains are naturally wired to remember the bad stuff. But you will forget the good stuff, right? Like how many of us get to the end of the day and it's like, oh my God, I had the worst day, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, 10 awesome things happen that you're not remembering because you're focusing on the one bad thing.
I love this. No, this is fantastic. But it's also making me think of another topic I'm guessing you might also address, which is perhaps rethinking our past and things that have happened to us and maybe assigning different meanings to those things. Right? Is that discussion you might have with people, I'm guessing?
Yes, often. Yes.
Yes. Because it's part of your identity, you know, this coming back full circle. And so, but how can we change that? So I'd love to hear how you work with your clients on that topic.
Yeah, I have a couple of ways that I approach it. First of all, I think it's really important to look at how the bad things we remember and the things that have hurt us from a broader perspective. Like, what was the lesson learned? Or what did that show me? Or was there a strength that I cultivated as a result of that experience that I would not have cultivated had that not happened? So it's, you know, bad stuff sucks. I'm not going to sit here and go like, oh, it was fine. You know, if unforgivable stuff happened in our lives, unforgivable stuff happened in our lives, right? But how we can work with that and grow beyond it is to recognize who we have become as a result, how we have survived. Like, the person that is here today survived that horrible thing. That's amazing. And if you can identify the strength and the qualities that grew in you as a result of what you've had to survive, that is what serves you moving forward. So that's one aspect I work with.
Post-traumatic, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other way I work with it is, and this is might be a bit esoteric for your audience, but hang in there, stay with me for a sec.
I love esoteric.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Then my people.
Yeah.
From a certain depth of the self, if you can deepen your relationship to yourself, there's a part of you that has never been harmed. There's a part of you that's never been hurt. There's a part of you that's bigger than this body, than this personality, than who you know yourself to be at this current time. And I help people access that deeper knowing, that deeper self that is bigger than the current problem or the past problem. So very often when we get fixated on things we need to fix or change about ourselves, about our lives, it's because we're living in a part of us that's too small for us. And the antidote is to access the part of us that's actually bigger than the problem. And from that perspective, now this is where meditation and self-inquiry and deepening ourselves becomes key. From that perspective, we can look at the problem because now we're bigger than it. We can look at it, have compassion for ourselves in the suffering of it, and have a bigger perspective from which to address it. So that's the other way that I work with things like that.
Yeah, no, it's like that we're actually making ourselves own prisoners. And I can't help but think of, I don't know, I'm sure you're familiar with the book Viktor Frankl and the Meaning of Life. But he has this great quote in there, which I might butcher, but basically that everything can be taken away from a human except their ability to choose, you know, their emotion in their head. But that's when you were talking about that, I mean, that's what it is. And people go through trauma, which could be a one-time incident, or it could have been 10 years. But then we hold on to these things that shouldn't have happened to me for 20 more years, 30 years. What's going on?
Yeah.
And but you know, there's the logical, the brain, there's a logical, and then there's, you know, the emotional component.
Right. And the emotional, it's more tender, right? And that's what I think we get afraid of. We get afraid. I've heard this over and over again. Oh, but if I go in there, I'm afraid I'll never come out. In particular, this comes up with grief, right?
Sure.
It's like if I let my grief be as big as it is, I may never come back. And my experience is that that's just simply not true. That's our protection and our fear talking on this side of it. But if we actually allow ourselves to grieve and to feel deeply, we do come out the other side. It's the fear that keeps us stuck.
Yeah, it's again, there was another quote, but basically it seems like ginormous, that fear, but when you actually step into it, it's like paper thin. And you're like, are you kidding?
Yeah,
You know, like
exactly.
jumping off, right?
And this is why it's so important to have people in our lives who can hold us in those spots. Because if we are afraid, it's easy to it is easy to get stuck, right? To have a story take over our brains and we think that it's true, and then we're stuck in that story for 20 years. This is the importance of having guides, therapists, all the various people who are available to work with to help us navigate those spots that we might otherwise kind of get lost in.
Again, because I feel like we lose this opportunity. Again, so maybe you could tell a little bit more about some of the, your positive transformations, I guess, of a couple of the people you've worked with, if someone particular comes in mind.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I have a client who, before we worked together, her therapist had been encouraging her to leave her husband for about 10 years. She was in an emotionally abusive situation. And after 7 months with me, she did. And then the work began, right? Because to rebuild a self after it's been so torn down by gaslighting and negative input takes time. But she is transformed into someone who's serious, doing incredible work and transformative work in the social justice space, in various cultural spaces. She's stepping into her own as a philanthropist. And yes, that voice, that negative voice, is still loud. That will probably always be there. I mean, it's still there for me sometimes, right? Like, though, it's not like our old patterns disappear, but they do dwindle as we build other parts of ourselves larger.
Options. You give options.
Yeah, we have options. So you can hear the negative thought come up and set it aside and keep going, versus having that negative thought derail you. So that's happening more and more for her, where she'll see the negative thing and she's like, nope, we're not doing that today, and she keeps going. And I'm just so proud of her. It's
Wow, well, that is life altering, and I'm sure it's at some point, you look back at some of these experiences, and it was like that was actually a different person who went through that.
Yeah, at some
Right?
point it does feel that way.
Like unrecognizable practically to, the person you've hopefully become. So how do people start who've been in situations like that, or even just, many women just start really visualizing or picturing, if they have no idea at all of this future version of themselves and what they want to experience? Like, how do you do that if you've been so restrained?
I think it's important to get yourself into communities with other women who are also exploring possibility, who are also opening up to more. So I would say the first step is to recognize that you want more, that the current situation is no longer enough for you. The second is to get yourself into communities of women who are expanding. And to that end, I have a community called the PassionBody Hub, where we have 2 monthly calls, and I do bonus trainings and things like that in there. And I do brain training. There's a specific technique of brain training that I offer once a month in the hub that aligns the conscious mind with the subconscious. Because what often happens as we're growing is we have this new desire, but our subconscious isn't on board yet, because our subconscious is trying to stay safe. So in order for that new desire to be able to come true and to take action consistently toward it, we have to get the subconscious on board. So once a month, I do a call where we do that with people's goals. And what's beautiful about it being in community is that you see that you're not alone, that the stuff your head says to you,
That's powerful.
other people in the group are hearing the same thing from their own heads. you know, and you realize, oh, this is kind of a common thing. I'm not unique in my dysfunction. You know, it's gotta, yeah, and you get more, you get
it's
more compassionate. Yeah, like you wouldn't treat somebody else the way you're treating yourself about your stuff, right? So you get to
yeah,
see.
no. This sounds so fantastic, and of course I will put a link in the description, but I'm thinking of people who maybe they're not thinking of their future self, but maybe they just know they're not fulfilled anymore. They're not happy, but they don't know what it is. They can't put their
Right.
finger on it.
Yes.
All of a sudden, they're just
Yeah.
kind of going through the motions of the day-to-day minutia. I mean, but I think you hit the nail on the head with putting together this supportive community, because all of a sudden when you realize, okay, this is an inner thought, and a lot of other people think this too. Like we're not that unique in our self-deprecating conversations we have, unfortunately. I think it's actually much more of a common bond.
It is. It's such a common thing. And when we can understand that that's kind of the default, then we stop, ideally, listening to it. We stop being so engrossed in it. We stop taking it as real, and we recognize, oh, this is just a filter overlaying the juicy stuff that exists underneath, which is my desires and my goals and my direction and my what lights me up and my passion. That all of that sits underneath these self-deprecating conversations. And the more we can create permission for ourselves to let that deeper thing out in a safe environment where it's going to be celebrated, because it may not be celebrated by our family, you know, because our family's invested in us staying the way we are sometimes. So we might have to like get some fortitude in another community before we can share what's evolving for us with our loved ones. This is what I see too. It's like sometimes our loved ones are so excited that we're growing, and sometimes our loved ones get scared. Like, are you going to grow away from me?
Right. It's like, honestly, even for me, I work with a lot of women who are trying to lose weight, but I think subconsciously, boyfriends and husbands can sabotage. They can
Yes.
feel threatened because they're comfortable with the way it is. And so how do you deal with that?
Well, that's where you have to get strong in a community first. And then I also teach people, because I work so much with communication, I teach people to have conversations more effectively, how to
Yes.
navigate. I have a whole training on how to navigate difficult and charged conversations better, with
Well,
more ease, with better
we're not
results.
given this. We are not given these instructions. I'm
We're
sorry.
not.
We're not given instructions how to raise children, and we're not
Nope.
given instructions how to have a marriage. So this is a beautiful thing, I have to say, because it's not just, not everything is intuitive, and it's also even socialized.
No, it's definitely not intuitive, because what happens is most of us get reactive.
Mhm.
You know, if we
Right.
present something and it's not met with approval, right? Or we get challenged on it, or it's actively being sabotaged, as you said, can sometimes happen. Very often in that spot, we either collapse and go, okay, well, forget about it. Or we get defensive. No, this is what I'm doing. You know, we go into reactivity, which is completely natural. It's a fight or flight natural response of the human nervous system, or freeze, right? We get stuck and frozen and can't move, get paralyzed and don't do anything. Or we fawn, which is going into people pleasing. We have to gain more facility with our own nervous system. So this is another thing that I teach people, if that's what they're needing, is how to really navigate their own nervous system when they get reactive, so that they don't create wreckage, so that they don't collapse, whatever it is, so that they can actually move more effectively toward their goals. We have to get more able to be with high sensation and not lose it.
Yeah, what I hear you keep saying over and over again, I think it's, being able to survive the emotions.
Yes.
Like that it's not going to, but it is so difficult and it's constant and random things will trigger you that you just go into that place of, and the way I describe it, fear. Like the world isn't safe somehow. And I'm going to control it by pleasing every single person around me so no one is mad.
I want to highlight that word control because it's so key.
Well, I
So
mean,
key.
it's a silly thing, and it's like it's playing a game of whack-a-mole, because I mean, ultimately, obviously there's going to be people who are unhappy with what you do and how you do it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's black or white and all of this, but that I think it's a narrative that a lot of us have that just, I mean, it causes tremendous anxiety.
Absolutely. And for most of us, our response to anxiety is to control, is to try to control the world around us. But there's a lot of freedom that arises when we realize we can't control the world around us. The only thing we can control is how we respond.
Yep.
And all we can control is expanding our capacity to respond more generously, lovingly, consistently, steadily. That's the only thing we really have control over. So when you get that focus back on what can I do? What strength can I cultivate? Who can I be? What radiance can I live into? That's where we really can create massive change.
And also going back to your journaling, I feel the same thing is so effective with relationships, and always trying to think about what someone did that was awesome, that you can focus on that. Because I feel we do the same thing with other people. Is you didn't put away the dishes, you left this out, why didn't you turn off the light, whatever, I don't know.
Yes.
But instead of being
100%.
like, oh my God, I'm just happy to see you. Like our
Yeah,
dogs are
that
about.
I love that you brought that back because so I have a couple of self-study courses that are about relationship. And the second module in the one that's for women who are in a relationship is all about appreciation of their partner. So yes, there's things you want to work on. Yes, there's things you want to change, but what are they doing right currently? And because we don't even notice, like your partner or spouse or husband, wife, etc., they may make your coffee for you every morning exactly how you like it and bring it to your desk, and you don't even notice it anymore. You don't even look up from the computer. You just pick up the cup and start drinking. But that's a gesture of love that you missed, that you didn't digest as a gesture of love. It's on us to notice those gestures and appreciate them. Because when we appreciate them, it paves the way for more of them to happen.
Exactly. And I mean, for me, I will just often say how grateful I am to be with you right now. And this is awesome.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be, because to me, it's like just you don't have to do anything. I mean, so often, like our children or whatever, we don't have to just, that idea of I love you for just being here.
Yes.
If more people could do that, I think that's it. I can't help but thinking of, I have to say, my 10 years of being in Toastmasters, we always use the sandwich effect. But it was very, very important with the critiques. Honestly, I want to know what I was doing that was good, that got a positive response. And then it wasn't a criticism, but something that we could do better next time on. Okay, fine. That with another one. I think it was a really good rule for life.
It's very effective. Yeah, I call that offering an adjustment. So let's think about it. For example, if you walk into a room and the temperature is not exactly how you like it, you just adjust the thermostat, right? There's no moral judgment. Oh my God, the room is bad because it was too cold. No, it's like the room just wasn't at the right temperature. You just tweak the thermostat. Adjustments in relationship could be like that too. It doesn't have to always have this huge charge. It can just be like, oh, hey, honey, next time, could you put a little less milk in the coffee?
Exactly.
Like it, so when we learn to communicate like that with zero charge, offering an adjustment, we're not making our partner wrong because they made the coffee badly. We're just saying, hey, I would love it if it were like this. That's just like turning keep wanting to call it thermometer, turning the thermostat slightly.
Yeah.
So if you can learn to think of, but here's what happens to us as women. We are so not taught how to ask for what we want that we would rather make our partner bad and wrong for not doing it right than to tell them exactly how we want them to do it.
Mind reading, because they're mind,
Yeah,
they know what we're
want
thinking.
them to mind read because we're uncomfortable with adjusting the thermostat.
Right, they should know. I mean, I totally relate to this, but you know, obviously, because it is hard. What if they get mad if I speak you know, an uncomfortable topic that is upsetting me? What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? But I
Yes,
think if you come at it at a place of positive and together, like us, like I to me, I always visualize like what is the ultimate outcome I want from this conversation. I think that's a
yes,
good,
that's where you start. That's very
I
good.
think to me that's the best thing myself.
And it's good to say that out loud. Like, hey, I want to have this conversation. And here's why. Like, here's my outcome that I want to get to. So that anytime the conversation starts to go off the rails, as it might, either one of you can bring it back. Hey, you know what? I feel like we're getting a little off topic here because remember, this is where we're trying to get. You know, is what we're doing right now going in that direction? No? Okay, let's redirect.
Yep. I think that's awesome. I think, yeah, maybe we get too casual with our spouses or loved ones. And because you wouldn't do that with someone at work, would you?
No.
You know, you wouldn't just like whoop, lay into them or something, you know what I mean?
I do.
But but
I
so
do.
I think taking the pause I think is fantastic, and just thinking about what we want in any situation and how we can better express our voice. Well,
So key.
yes, well, this has been such a fantastic conversation. And in wrapping up here, I'm just wondering if there's anything else, of course, you want to share, but just, you know, summarizing again your, you know, the passion body again, just wrapping up the whole discussion on that. And then I love what you said about beyond the passion body, what is the one that's Jane Fonda?
The radiant body.
Okay, this is my new thing. I'm going there.
That's where we're going.
The radiant body.
Yep. And in
I
order to go to the radiant body, we have to activate the passion body. That's why this work in midlife is so key.
because it's
So instead of approaching the changes that are happening, which can be overwhelming and sometimes very uncomfortable, instead of approaching them as something wrong that needs to be fixed, you know, it gets very pathologized, perimenopause and menopause. Instead of approaching this time of our lives as something wrong that needs fixing so we can try to get back to who we were 30 years ago, which is not going to happen, my invitation is to go deeper and actually activate your passion, your light, your truth, your deeper self, so that the changes are less loud because you're so turned on by where you're headed. That's what gets us into the radiant body later.
I love it, and I feel the excitement. I'm ready.
Right on. May I say a quick word about my quiz?
Please, absolutely.
Okay, So I have this awesome quiz that I created called the Grown Ass Power Quiz, which is for women who are facing this moment, who are kind of like, what's next for me? And maybe don't know which way to head. Take this quiz. You can find it at yourpowerquiz.com. And you take this quiz and it'll give you your dominant passion body archetype. And there's all sorts of learning and content of the strengths and the places that might be harder for you, given that this is your dominant archetype. And it kind of helps to give you a framework and a way of understanding yourself compassionately, so that moving forward becomes easier and clearer and more fun and more aligned. So I would love for the women in the audience to take the quiz. It is specifically for women, and it's called yourpowerquiz.com.
I love it. Well, I am certainly going to put the links to all of your content and even your 2 TEDx on there, and where they can. Yes, well, I think, you know, you have fantastic information to share, and it's so inspiring that people should feel they have their best days ahead of them instead of behind them. I think,
Firmly believe that, because
that's how I'm
I
summarizing.
firmly believe that, because at this moment in life, we can actually start to liberate ourselves from the constrictions of the past. That's what becomes possible now, if we choose that.
Well, I love it. So again, thank you very much.